So I just went back and played Grand Theft Auto 5's story for the first time since it came out in 2013. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, I honestly do not think it's as good as I remembered it being. And let's talk about why that is. As far as negatives for GTA 5, for me, it all comes down to the narrative itself. Revisiting Los Santos all these years later was really fun. I had a great time playing this game and can't deny that it's exciting and fun to play through and through. Other than the occasional long drive across the map, nothing felt like a chore or felt fatiguing due to repetition, which is really hard to pull off in a game this long and full of content. But playing through the game, especially on a second playthrough, you start to look below the surface, and I came to realize that there really isn't all that much to GTA 5's plot, which I feel is kind of weird given all the praise this game has gotten in the 12 years since it's been out. But the narrative can basically be summed up with our three protagonists spending the game making various enemies as they are forced by FIB operatives to commit various crimes to cover up their own corruption. This dynamic of working under the FIB manipulation comes to a breaking point where either they're going to die or they need to come up with a way to solve all of their problems, which just turns into them killing everybody, which is how the game finds its conclusion. I know that's really simplistic, but that's really most of this game. You do smaller missions preparing for these elaborate heists, then the occasional mission to deal with the fallout of those who stand to lose money when you make it from these heists. But all of the heists typically revolve around either making money to do these missions for the FIB or the missions from the FIB themselves. And there are some other intricacies found within the story. Michael has a subplot with his family, but even then, once you really look at that, it all feels really random and not very realistic from any sense. Franklin then supposedly has a love interest that we only see once throughout the entire game. At the end. Like, why or how am I supposed to care about this part of the narrative? I am a little curious if going back through you could call and hang out with her as Franklin and maybe there's some development there. But it being optional and easy to miss doesn't really set it up for being a big part of Franklin's character like they kind of imply. And then, half as a joke, Trevor seems to fall in love with his kidnappee, who apparently is partially interested in him but still committed to her marriage. It's just random and weird. It doesn't really give meaning to the story. My memories of this game held up this idea of a really interesting narrative where Michael dramatically struggles to piece his family back together, and these guys are pulling off these spectacular heists out of survival. And while these things exist within the game, upon a second playthrough, they come across as really shallow, playing them any older than 13 or 14 years old. And don't even get me started on the 3 different endings you can choose between. I've only gotten to the end of the game twice now, and both times I chose option 3, which is to save everyone and take out all of the collective enemies. And I would assume this is likely the canon ending to the game. I really don't know why the other endings are even included, if I'm being honest. I would guess that once they nailed down Trevor's character and realized how polarizing he'd be.
Bon appetito!
Jesus Christ, Trevor, what is that?
What's wrong with you? That's just a what? An eyelid. That's probably not even human. Unless that gas
They
station
thought it'd be
car.
cool to include the option to kill him if a player really hated his antics throughout the story. Then with that implemented, they became obligated to add another option for Michael as well for those who may not have liked him as a character. Though this does kind of get me thinking that maybe it is the complicated characters here we're supposed to be gripped by, rather than the overall narrative or plot. Kind of like the way Skyrim shines through its small individual quests and its world, rather than the message conveyed through its main storyline. Maybe GTA 5 is meant to kind of be thought-provoking in how its ensemble of characters are presented, rather than the narrative we follow them through. That could explain the amount of times we see Michael in therapy discussing his own psyche, or how Trevor's the only one who gets a detailed backstory where we hear about his childhood, his dreams to be a pilot, and the mental illness that acted as a barrier of him fulfilling that dream. I could kind of understand that being the focus GTA 5 wanted to have, especially having 3 characters rather than 1, but still, I can't quite get over the lack of depth or serious in the narrative here. And even within these characters studying them, a lot of it is really silly and over the top just to be over the top. Like, Red Dead Redemption 2 proves that Rockstar has the capability of making something very deep as well as enjoyable throughout. And GTA 5 I found is not a great example of that quality. The next thing I feel GTA 5 didn't do all that well in is the establishment of the power curve that we typically see in GTA games. The same way classic COD Zombies had this very distinct power curve where you were underpowered at the start of a game, and as you work through this disadvantage, you gain power in the game's dynamic exponentially. This provides a sense of stakes in the early game, paired with a sense of accomplishment in the late game. The Grand Theft Auto series traditionally works in a similar fashion, where in the early parts of the narrative you have no weapons, no money, and sometimes limited access to the open world itself. As you then join the ranks of the crime underworld, you slowly find exposure to money, weapons, and the full map. To say it frankly, GTA 5 spits in the face of this idea. They give you Franklin as their stand-in for the broke starter character, but you immediately have access to Michael, who just starts off with a good amount of money. Then just a few missions in, Michael and Franklin rob a jewelry store, which sets them both up with a very good amount of money. They make us lay low for a bit where we're introduced to Trevor, who also very quickly builds a small fortune. And then for better or for worse, there aren't really any restrictions on the map here either, which in and of itself isn't a huge deal, but just an example of how there is really no good resemblance of the power curve seen in other Grand Theft Auto titles. And this is important because this curve really dictates the pacing of the game as you move through it. Which kind of leads us into the next thing that I found distinct about Grand Theft Auto 5. Because Grand Theft Auto as a franchise was always a bit over the top. And this game in particular cranks that up to 11. GTA 5 tries very hard to be a spectacle in just about every way that it can. While this makes for a fun experience, it further screws with the narrative and the progression that the player feels. Based on how I felt playing through this game, the peak of craziness that GTA 5's campaign throws at you is found in the mid-game. Like with the mission Minor Turbulence, where Trevor's crazy ass takes a biplane and attempts to hijack a Merryweather jet by flying into the back of it and jumping aboard. This ends up being a super memorable mission that doesn't actually provide anything of value to the story because Trevor isn't able to salvage the plane from that point and has to ditch it. It's so weird that such a wild set piece was essentially wasted on a 15-minute mission that doesn't result in anything beyond a, oh well. Then, relative to the narrative, very shortly after that point, the gang is dragged by the FIB to steal a bioweapon-capable nerve agent from a research facility. I mean, this sort of big heist is usually the kind of thing other games may build up to as a finale.
This'll make me the most dangerous man in the country. I'm also the most shit scared. Oh man. Thank you, federal government.
Which is pretty cool, by the way, that GTA is so huge and bombastic that saving the country from a dangerous bioweapon is only the mid-game. The issue with it here is that the end of the game isn't even a heist. You just switch between the characters as they assassinate their collection of enemies, and it's like once you're past that point with the nerve agent, even the Union Depository doesn't end up feeling all that big and exciting compared side by side. Like, if you're gonna make Trevor crash planes into each other 100% by himself, like it's just another Tuesday afternoon, and then save the world from a bioweapon just in passing, then you better have one hell of an ending. And I really felt after finishing the story that the ending was a bit of a letdown due to how insane the missions were earlier in the game. This, paired with the lack of the classic rags to riches buildup, it really makes this game feel sporadic and all over the place while playing. And again, it's really fun to experience, but doesn't live up to the amazing storytelling I remember it having in my head. And for most games, I feel like the lack of these things would have really turned people off. But I think the reason this doesn't drag down Grand Theft Auto 5 is that it very much fits the vibe of a 2013 LA caricature. The way I've seen it, LA itself in real life has a reputation of being hyperbolic of American ideals, American hypocrisies, and American culture in general. And Grand Theft Auto as a series has always offered a satirical look at American culture, often by taking things into hilarious, hyperbolic extremes. This made the Grand Theft Auto brand and the vibe of 2010's LA a match made in heaven. And that's why parts of this game really do work. And why in everyone's first playthrough and the timing of the release in 2013, a lot of these issues went kind of unnoticed or forgiven. And now that I've finished Grand Theft Auto 5 for the second time, I don't think the same chase for a spectacle should be in GTA 6's narrative. But I want to be clear, I hope that the Vice City representation of Florida craziness is on full display in GTA 6. I just hope that the overall narrative itself can be gritty and more grounded, following the rise of a criminal mastermind from the bottom to the top, as we've known to see and love in all of the Grand Theft Auto titles. GTA has always looked to poke fun at America through its quirky, disturbing, and ever-present satire. But before Grand Theft Auto 5, I think this was mostly contained to the side content, radio stations, and other missable or optional details found throughout the larger world. Once we get to GTA 5, this satire and accompanying spectacle increased in size and scope, fully penetrating the game's main narrative in ways you don't really see in the previous titles. I feel that this is kind of why Trevor exists in the first place. The ways in which he is totally unpredictable and insane are genuinely fun to experience as the story progresses, especially following the time that Michael is hiding this massive secret from him. The drama and stress that comes with not knowing exactly when this is going to be revealed, and really not knowing how Trevor is going to react to all of it, is pretty exciting while playing. Although again, the reveal of the secret I think falls really flat. Like, they felt like they didn't have enough time to develop it or really show how Trevor was gonna react to it. And I definitely would agree with people who may say they find like Trevor and his antics annoying or disturbing, but Trevor is a large amount of the intrigue we see in this story. But I hope that Rockstar understands that not every game needs a Trevor, or that the hyperbolic nature of GTA 5 doesn't need to be topped by the next game. It just needs to be adapted to feel comparable to the setting and story that takes place in this new location and with our new cast of characters. And playing GTA 5 just mere months away from the GTA 6 release window now has me a little worried that there is a certain kind of stress at Rockstar in regards to how the next GTA game will need to be better than Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm scared that this could cause them to raise the level of crazy in an attempt to up the ante for the series. Looking to GTA 6 with Florida as the new location, I would very much like to see a return of the style of GTA game we saw before Grand Theft Auto 5. And although I'm walking away surprised with how much I learned I don't really like about Grand Theft Auto 5 after my second playthrough, man, was this game still super enjoyable. Despite all the issues I have with the narrative, there is no doubt that playing through the story is still really thrilling. It's super fun and enjoyably over the top in all of the most entertaining ways. My favorite games are typically ones that make me sit and think as the credits roll, contemplating the world I just spent my time in and that I now need to separate myself from. But beating Grand Theft Auto 5 just left me thinking about how much fun it was to experience. This was a crazy joyride of a game, and that can be just as good as something super thought-provoking. Neither way of presenting a story or making a player feel is objectively better than the other if done correctly. And I am glad they were so solid in their vision with Grand Theft Auto 5. If they attempted some jack-of-all-trades trying to be super realistic and deep, as well as super grandiose and over the top, it could have really likely fallen flat.
Tell you one thing, T. I'm getting too old for this nonsense.
So here's hoping GTA 6 can stay just as focused with the story it wants to tell. Thanks for watching.